I read 37 books this year so far, and these 10 are the best, the ones that you cannot miss. Starting with some honorable mentions, because I reread some of my all-time favorite books and I just cannot stop recommending them. We have in one hand a story that completely changed my mind around what I liked when I was reading. I thought these two different elements, in one hand being an urban fantasy and the other being this almost Godfather-style book, was not going to be for me. However, I was so excited to discover that this story, it's character-driven, but it's so dramatic and it is so well done. It just has some scenes that were amazing, and while I was rereading and I knew what was gonna happen, the book was just even better because you just cherish every little moment, and that is Jade City by Wanda Lee. So book 1 in the Greenbone saga. I am loving this so much more the second time around. Just the idea of having these two different bands fighting for the control of the Jade, but what really relies is a very political and very strategic story and just this family drama. If you need an easy 5-star read, take this one. Another story that I reread and that I absolutely recommend is this fantasy standalone that it's really low on magic and that takes all the tropes that you know and just twists them and makes something that is absolutely new. It's so easy to read, but at the same time it is hard-hitting, it is very emotional, and I was so consumed by this story from the beginning. I knew this was going to be an all-time favorite for me, and while I was rereading it, I was like, hell yeah, like this is true. It consolidates. It starts with something happening now, very dramatic, very terrible, and then you're thrown back into the past so that you're able to cherish the past and those calm moments of our main character, Emily Mashwick. And I'm talking about Guns of the Dawn by Adrian Tchaikovsky. This, in my opinion, is one of the best standalones that you can pick. It is this very war-driven book. Well, you have this Pride and Prejudice element. It will really explore the horrors of war, of PTSD, of really not wanting to move forward. I think it's so unique, and that Adrian Tchaikovsky is a genius. Also, as a secret, I am rereading Way of Kings and I am absolutely loving it. I read this for the first time, I guess 10 years ago, and I am shocked about the amount of foreshadowing and the amount of elements that I am discovering. I am not crying, but all of the time that I'm reading a phrase that, you know, stuff happens, it's so emotional. I am loving this. So really also recommend Stormlight Archive if you want to pick this one up. Now for the proper list, in position number 10, we have a story from Nelthor that I read more stuff before, and I also adored her way of writing. I just think that how she combines humor with a plot that it's very usually easy to follow, and it is fairly addictive with characters that are always misfits, and in this quest that feels like heist, but it has really high stakes. It's making it for a very delightful read. It is the first book in a duology, and I am already in book 2, and I'm not sure if the ending it's landing as good as the first book, but I absolutely love the idea of having these different characters going into a suicide mission and having this much banter, this much humor, and that is The Clockwork Boys by T. Kingfisher. The humor of this author, it is so characteristic of her writing, and if you love dark humor, you will love this. It's such a delightful read, also very short, so you can read that and it will get you out of a slump, I guarantee you that. In position number 9, we have a story that was really adventurous, and I remember thinking while reading this, oh wow, this is lush and this is also very unique, and it is placing me in a very good mood. It's not a happy book necessarily, but it's a story that will uplift you, that will get you in all of these summery vibes that you might need right now. And it's a story that has pirates, that has an adult character, but it also has these different animal creatures, a heist. It also has this crew of misfits, and I love those tropes. I had so much fun with this story, The Adventures of Amina Ali. It's a weird blend because you will have a fair amount of fairy tale, of this whimsy way of telling stories, being lush, but at the same time there are elements that are very savage. It's the perfect read if you want something that has this adventure twist to it. Position number 8, we have a story that it's gaining more popularity as of late, and I can really easily see why. It's this story that, although it feels like it's not going to be for you because it's this really Dungeons and Dragons kind of story, at the same time it's also an adventure. You will have these very charismatic characters characters, and it is non-stop. It's the pacing, it's absolutely nuts. Every scene you are like, I want to keep reading, but at the same time you just want things to chill for our characters. It's a story that also has a fair amount of humor. It is very easy to read, to consume, to get addicted to it. You just would want to read it in just one sitting because everything is making this story easy for you, and that is Dungeon Crawler Carl. I've just read book 1, but I know that book 2 onwards also the story just gets improved. Also the narration, it's very good if you want to give the audiobook a try, but in this case we'll have these characters that are likable, especially the sentient cat, which is absolutely hilarious. And the premise is that world has collapsed, aliens are taking world, but they are placing us in a kind of Hunger Games story where the humans that remain need to fight these different bosses, and they will go layer by layer by layer through the world, and eventually someone might survive or not. But the twist here is that everything is televised as in the Hunger Games. So there's this part of you need to be charismatic, and it's just so hilarious to see how our characters are moving forward through this story. But at the same time, it is not just a funny story, because the proper idea of having most of the population dying, it is quite sad, and our characters every now and then reflect on that and face situations that are quite hard. So I thought it was a great blend of having something that can hit an emotional point, but at the same time is a very easy and light read that I would recommend if you want something to get out of a slump. Position number 7, a story that I got recommended time and time again, and I was not sure if this was going to be for me. All in all, it's part of this massive world where there's a lot of different standalones, you can read them, but it just, you know that it's connected, and I knew that a lot of people loved this story, so the stakes were super high for me and I was hesitant getting to it. However, what I discovered, it's a story that not only had great characters, an amazing story, but also just this humor that I love from beginning to end. It's a story that will really shine in how the characters are crafted. You have the very bad, the very good, and everyone in between. I just cherish this story. I wanted to keep reading, and it's just one of those moments in which you know that a book is not that long and you just almost wish that the book will be longer and just to keep reading, even if the story is properly fit to what the pages it has, and that is Guards by Terry Pratchett. I am getting slowly but surely into this world, and I must say this is the best one that I've read so far. I absolutely loved our characters, and also the idea, like from the beginning, this story was absolutely funny. The idea of having this society of almost bad people, and they are, you know, plotting, and it's just like the brethren. And I loved it. It was so funny, and there's dragons, there's wizards, there's these guards. Oh, it is absolutely unforgettable, and I really recommend if you would like something that it is, again, light, but it is such a solid book. It's not one of those stories that you will read and you'll be just like, meh, this was good, but forgettable. No, this will create a mark in your life. I would really recommend, and whenever I'm finding myself not as motivated to read, I'm like, I'm gonna just pick one chapter, and it's just so much fun that I'm like, okay, yeah, I love reading, let's continue. Position number 6, we have a story on the complete opposite side of things. So quite sad, quite reflective, more dramatic, more on this is a book that you need to savor. It is a very polarizing story, which I thought I was gonna hate, because last year I started reading it and I DNF'd it, and I was like, I don't understand the hype of this book. I honestly believe it is not that good, which it's absolutely fair, but I gave it a second opportunity this year and I was amazed. So it's a story that definitely you need to be in the mood, because it is a sci-fi standalone that will get you slowly but surely into this world where you don't really understand what is happening, so you need to trust the process, and it is so messy. Each chapter, it is fairly short. You will be changing these two perspectives, and the whole story is written in the terms of letters that are sent between these different sides of this story, and these letters change into something that it's more emotional, more beautiful, and at the same time more confusing. Eventually you will understand what happens, but it's a story that will ask a lot of you, and that is, this is how you lose the time war. It's that kind of story that will make you feel not small, but just that you want to reflect and you want to be a ball. Like, in your house, just reflecting, watching rain, like to feel the feels, is that kind of story. Position number 5, we have a story that recently won the SPFBO. Since I read Sword of Kagan, which was the winner of this prize some years ago, I always make a commitment with myself to read the winners of this list, because it is a great opportunity to find indie books that are absolutely outstanding. And this year it's a very different story to what I was expecting, but I loved it. It is a very easy book, and although it goes into a side that I'm not usually a super fan of, and I'm not really used to read books that lean more into the mystery, into the thriller, I really enjoyed reading Murder at Spindle Manor. The most amazing thing about this book was the humor. I loved it from the beginning. It was such a good story. You know that our main character will need to kill someone that it is at this manor, and the aesthetics, the environment, it's top-notch. It is so gothic. The different characters were hilarious, and the situations were also really good. Incredibly easy to read. The only weak side that I can see to this story is that you won't have a lot of character depth. It's a story that goes more towards the plot side and moving really fast and having these chapters in which every time something is happening, and you really will feel the need of being like, okay, let me 1 second figure out all of these different clues that I am seeing, because I really want to figure out who is the murderer, who is the monster. At the same time, it's a story that won't allow you to have a lot of inside mind of our main characters, which I think it's fair usually with detective-esque stories. So it is just a flaw if you want your characters and your reads to be deeply character driven. But if you're willing to just spend an amazing time to give an indie book a try and just read something that will get you to that Agatha Christie mood, I really recommend Murder at Spindle Manor. And although I loved all of these books, from position 4 to position 1, there's a jump. Like, some of the books that I'm gonna be mentioning have reached the all-time favorite, I really love them kind of status. And there are others that I am really committing and a lot of time to reading and enjoying, and it's making my whole personality. And the proof of that is the one that we see in position number 4, which is a story that I started reading last year. It's on the longer side, both because the stories are long and because the series is 14 books long. However, it's one of the most popular fantasy series of all time. It's loved by a lot of different readers and booktubers that I really admire. I'm in book 4 right now, and I am loving how this world is changing, it's expanding, and it's really, really an epic fantasy story, and that is Wheel of Time. But this year specifically, I absolutely loved book 3, Dragon Reborn. There's this different characters that you will see throughout the story, right? And the different elements that I lived while reading this story were outstanding. I really believe it's that kind of story that as a first-time reader, I am barely hanging through. I am trying to understand all of the different pieces, and thank you to my Patreons, I am really understanding more, because we are having a Wheel of Time read along throughout this whole year, and most of the readers that are in this read along are readers that have read this before and they know phrases by heart, which just makes me so inspired, and it really makes me believe that this is an amazing series when you get people as passionate as that knows the phrases, knows the prophecies. I just want to stick and to remain with them. What I saw with this story, it's something that was really, really, really heart-wrenching, and the characters are advancing at its core, fight between good and evil, but done in an amazing way. Position number 3, we have a story which I thought I was gonna hate, and I absolutely loved. The pacing was on the lower side, but at the same time, it was so character driven, it was so beautiful, and it allowed me to really reflect about solitude, about fate, about destiny, about being brave, about being remembered, and what are the extents to which I will go in order to create a mark on the world. And it really inspired me, it really changed me, and it was what I needed to read at a moment in which I was reading it. And this book also can be position number 2 or top 1. It really changes. I absolutely loved this story, which is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by B. Schwab. I love the writing style of this author. She always has this way of crafting characters that are unique, and the stories that have different layers. You will always have this emotional side to it, this savage side, and I loved the different characters. I was reading it, and afterwards I was just, I wanted to to take a walk, a long walk, and I went to the forest and I started to reflect. It made a mark on me and changed my behavior and changed how I see life. So I really recommend if you're seeking something in that aspect. Position number 2, we have a story that saved me. I was in the biggest reading clump potentially of my life, and I just started reading this, and from the beginning I remembered why I love so much fantasy and why I love these kind of stories. I keep seeing things that are amazing, not only that the characters are really likable, but at the same time they are put on this fate that they do not want, and they are kind of like fighting their way through it. We have these friends that are finding their path. We have this magical animal companion that I loved. And although their fantasy tropes are really common, they're done in a way that it feels fresh. It feels like you want to keep reading. Like there's comfort, but at the same time, there's this element of there's something new that you will like to read. And that is Of Blood and Fire by Ryan Cahill. I found myself reading this long hours into the night. What I can say is that although it is also on the longer side, it's a story that really feels really fast. That once you start, it's very easy to get addicted. You see these different POVs suffering and advancing, and you just want them to be, taken care of, which it's not gonna happen. And now position number 1, best book of the year so far for me. We have a sci-fi standalone, which is really surprising for me because I'm not usually really leaning to the sci-fi side. However, this story was so amazing because the character work was on point. The pacing was absolutely nuts. Each chapter was like a small cliffhanger, which made it absolutely addictive. I was not able to stop reading this, and the story on itself was really transcendent in my mind. It talked about the power of memories and the key role in order to craft our identities. We will have, yes, this blend of sci-fi, and just it made it for such an amazing story, and that is Recursion by Blake Crouch. It is short, it is addictive, and I cannot recommend it more to anyone. It was mind-blowing. I still find myself thinking about this. What would I do if I were to be in the same position as our main characters, which I think is one of the great things that Blake Crouch is able to achieve. I also read Dark Matter, which I also really liked, but in this story, I liked it even more because the power of brain. One of the things that I love the most about this author is that it takes one idea and it really pulls through that and to the last consequences, to the ultimate consequences. I was mesmerized, and I really recommend to anyone. Even if you are not used to read sci-fi, I don't either, and I enjoyed this incredibly. Let me know which was your favorite book of this year so far, and if you want to see my all-time favorite books, I will leave here a video. Now, if you're liking this content so far, consider joining my Patreon. We have a book of the month, Wheel of Time read along, reading sprints, game nights. We have a really cozy community, and I would love if you would join us. And thank you so much to my Patreons who support me and my passion. I am forever thankful. Thank you.